За мен е две-три думички, може би някои от вас ме видяха на първоначалното представяне. Казвам се Алекс, работя за Microsoft от близо 6 години. Бях Dev евангелист, беше тогава, което е общо взето това, което правя и в момента. Към днешна дата това, което правя или титлата е Dev Engagement Lead, т.е. в 30-те страни, които представляват Централна и Източна Европа, аз съм гласа на девелоперите пред Microsoft. Тоест, връщам обратна връзка, работя с девелопери, самия аз идвам от девелопер бекграунд, може да погледнете LinkedIn ми за всичките тези възможности, съответно един follow в Twitter е винаги добре дошъл. Това ни помага като спикъри да ни избират. Като погледнат колко човека имаш в Twitter, ако кажат, имаш 300 фолуари, не ставаш много за спикър, така че ако кликнете info, е добре дошъл. Така, сега, имаше няколко много интересни въпроса, може би някои от вас ме видяха на щанда. Всъщност как Microsoft е свързан с GitHub. Microsoft преди 3 години вече купи GitHub, реално, но това са две отделни организации, т.е. Microsoft притежава GitHub, но GitHub продължава да оперира като отделна организация. Should I switch to English, by the way? Okay. All right. So, let me kind of start from here. So, while I was during I would say our booth, kind of giving out t-shirts, etc., people were asking me how is Microsoft related to GitHub. So, for those of you that kind of missed the news, Microsoft purchased GitHub a couple of years back, and GitHub is operating as its own entity, and it's developing its own products. But we are one family, let's put it like this. But a couple of really great stuff kind of emerged out of this, having the GitHub technology reach to community and all the great stuff that they are providing, and the power of, let's say, the cloud or the Azure, the compute that Microsoft's providing. Because large part of what Microsoft's doing today is actually Azure. And this means a lot of machines that needs to be used for something. And one of those features that kind of came up was the GitHub Actions, where you can spin up a build and have a deployment. So this is actually Azure behind it. And there were like other two things that kind of popped up. One of them, I think it's not that popular, is the Codespace. So we'll kind of look at details what Codespace exactly is, but Codespace would actually be a development environment in the cloud. Basically, you're using either your favorite development environment, or you can use our browser-based VS Code, and a container or a VM will spin up in the backend where the code will be checking, and you'll be doing all your coding in the cloud. Now, a lot of people will ask, like, what's the reason for this? Like, why we are doing this? Now, let me just give you a couple of examples from my experience. For example, while I was part of a product group at Cisco, we were not allowed to have a code on our local machines. The code was not supposed to leave the premises. So we were either using VMs or something like this would have been very useful. The other thing would be you have a development environment with a lot of services running around. For example, for one of the products that I've worked, I had to use a NoSQL database, a SQL database, Solar for indexing, and a couple of other stuff. So running all those stuff on your VM, on your laptop is not a great option. So this is another angle. And maybe last but not least, if you have an iPad with a keyboard, you can launch a browser and basically have a development environment with everything that you need. So that's what Codespace is all about. The other thing that I think got a little bit more popularity and people are really interested what exactly is doing is the Copilot. So Copilot is another feature which basically allows you, when you use the plugin in VS Code, and there's like a bunch of other development environments supported, what it's doing is it's kind of recommending you code. So it kind of picks up the context of the things that you are doing, and then you're asking like, I want to do something, but I'm not exactly sure how to structure it, and it will provide you with code snippets that you want to use. So let me pause here for a second, and let me just set up the stage. Me, as a dev advocate, means that I usually write in 3 or 4 languages during a month. So JavaScript, Java, it could be Rust or maybe Go. I'll be switching a lot of frameworks, a lot of stuff. So, for example, my core language is Java, and I'm pretty well familiar with what I'm doing there. But when I switch to another language, I usually forget something, or I haven't used, for example, Express framework for a long time. I wouldn't know the exact syntax. So that's where the Copilot would help me, rather than going to Stack Overflow or any other forums or official documentation to copy and paste something. This would be directly bring to my environment. So that's like, long story short, what's Copilot all about. Now you might ask, like, how is Copilot recommending all those nice features, and how is recommending code? And that's where I would say GitHub really shines. And if you've been following, there's been, I think that it's just finished, the Octoverse, the GitHub annual event. So these are the latest, I would say, numbers and data that's been brought out of it. So 94 million developers on GitHub, a lot of companies, a lot of open source projects. 90% of companies use open source projects. So we have like commercial software that's using open source, and there's like number of contributions to open source projects. So if you think about it, that's a lot of code. And that's a great exercise for machine learning to learn how to write code. And a lot of people were asking, like, where is this code coming from? Does it go to a public repo, finds a code snippet, copies it and pastes it in your environment? Does it work like that? And honestly, I don't have a clear answer. It's a kind of a black magic stuff, but from what I know from my colleagues, all the code is generated through a machine learning. So there's no copy paste, although sometimes you can see like commands or something like this, but this is a generated code. Now, a lot of people are like, yeah, but my code is unique, I want to protect it, I would never go to GitHub if it's scanning my code, etc. Don't worry, there's like a setting where you can say, I don't want Copilot to look at my code, it's mine, I keep it as a private repo, that's completely okay. So there's option like this as well. Cool, so that's what we are going to talk about. The other thing was, I got a question like, Microsoft, is it all about like .NET? Like, why? What you are doing here? Like, what's Microsoft doing here? And since the, let's say, Azure kind of appeared, I was originally recruited to speak for the open source project and open source languages running on top of Azure. So we do support all the languages, and we do have a dedicated page for the JavaScript developers. There's actually not only learning resources, beginners learning resources, tutorials, and all the frameworks that we are doing, as well how you can use Azure services to host the things that you are doing. And with that, I've set up the stage, and well, let's go to GitHub and see some of the things that are there for Java developers. Now, before jumping to Codespace, let me show you my personal email. That's my personal email. And here you can see that GitHub is sending me regular alerts. So for every developer out there, there's an option now. If you go to the security settings, and you can enable something that's called a Dependabot. Now, what is Dependabot doing? Dependabot is checking all your dependencies, the ones that you are using. If you remember when you do like npm install, and then you see a whole bunch of libraries kind of being included in your code. Dependabot will take care of scanning those libraries over time, and if there's a security vulnerability discovered in one of them, it's going to recommend you an update. And it's going to do like a couple of great stuff, just send you the alert, send you an information, what exactly is the problem, but also for some of those cases, it's going to create a pull request for you. So you just need to review the pull request, do the commit, and then you're free. There's no more security issues or security threats. So that's one of the features. It's free, it's available. You just need to enable it for your repos. Okay, so let me just let me kind of give a little bit more background. What we are going to do is we are going to start a repo from scratch. What I'm going to try to do is actually to create a code space environment where I'll be doing my code. We'll install the Copilot, and I'll try to guide Copilot to code for me. We'll try to create an application, something simple, web application, REST-based API, a MongoDB connection or something like this, and we'll see how GitHub Copilot is performing. All of this is live, so I haven't rehearsed it, and in a way I'll be winging it, so please bear in me. And from time to time, if I do struggle with the Node.js, I do expect you guys to help me out with some of the things that we are there. So let's start. Let me just create or maybe I can use an existing repo. Let's say, okay, let's create a new repo, and we'll call this just all 2020. Okay, select an owner, that's me, description, GS demo. We'll make this public. Let's have a README file. As a template, I'll use something that will kind of make sure my gitignore take care of all the node dependency as a license, an MIT license, and I think I'm good with my repo. Let's give it a go. Now, oh great. One other trick that not many people might know, before starting the code spaces and all that stuff, if you go up here in the URL, and instead of com, you write a dev, look what's going to happen. You're getting a Visual Studio Code in the browser with your source repo directly available. So you can install some of the extensions here, but not all are supported. Remember, there's no VM running behind it. It's just a pure web application. So anyway, it will take some time to show me which are the extensions that I can do, but let me just quickly add maybe app.js. This would be the start of our application. And if I go here to the browser, as you can see, I can always do a add, and then I can do a commit. Hopefully, yeah, I can do a commit. So initial commit. So it's not just I would say, an editor. It's a way for you to edit your files and kind of do commits as well. You can do this in any repo. So previously, that was a challenge for me. You go to the repo, you start opening files, but now all of those files are available for you directly. So let me jump back. So we do have our first commit. Let's see if it's going to pop up. The index file, it's here, it's great. Now, what we can do is launch a code space, the development environment for us. A couple of options. If you go here, there are a couple of things that you can do. You can do a configuration of your containers. I'll show this a little bit later, but new with options. So basically, you're saying which is the main branch that you want to check out, and what's happening when you're building the container. GitHub will do a shallow checkout, so it's going to check out just the latest Git commit. It's not going to check out the entire repo. Basically, this is saving you space when you're creating the container. And then you can choose from different machine types. For some subscriptions, I think that there are some bigger machine types, but these are the ones that are available for me. So let me click on Create a Code Space, and in the backend, what will happen is that GitHub will tell, hey, Microsoft friends, Azure, give me a VM or give me 2 cores and spin a container on those cores. So this container could be available for our guy Alex, so he can do some coding as well. So we see things are kind of starting to pop up here and there. The repo is checked out for me, and as you can see now, I have a terminal where I can do some interesting stuff. So first thing that I do usually is to check out what is the operating system running. So essentially the default one would be Ubuntu. which is great. Most of the tools are there. Do I have an NPM? I do. I said that I want to do a Node.js development, so that's available here as well. And there are a bunch of other tools that are available for you. And that's based on the, let's say, the standard container that's there. Now, let me just quickly add a Copilot. So let's see which are the extensions, and I'm looking for Copilot. Okay, that's the one. And let me install this one in the Codespaces. By the way, you can do all of those things in your local VS Code. So Copilot is available for your VS Code. The other thing would be when you start a Codespace, there is an option for you to open the Codespace in VS Code. So the local VS Code will launch, and you will be using the container that's running in the cloud. So a lot of interesting stuff. So Copilot is enabled. If you look here at the bottom, where you can't see it because my lovely face is there, but you will see a small icon that's saying that the Copilot is up and running. Now, let me just quickly go back to the Codespaces and try to do something else. That was great, right? We created the development environment. We had the initial checkout, but like, by the way, most of the shortcuts in the browser version are working. So Control-Shift-P will bring the palette. So Codespaces, and one of the things that I want to do is like add dev container configuration file or change machine type or dev container features. So let me start with this, add dev container configuration file. Now, here I can do a little bit of a customizations on the things that I'm doing. I said that I want to do maybe Node.js, maybe MongoDB, so let me see if there's like something for nodes. And as you can see, yeah, there are a couple of other options here. There's like Node, there's like Node with MongoDB, and there's like Postgre. And the first time that I saw this was like, okay, that's interesting, but where is the MongoDB running? Is it running in the same container? Is it running in a different container? How is this organized? And of course, the only way for me to check this out was to provision one of those VMs. So let's put, I think, 16. And by the way, these are the so-called features that you can add. So you do have access to the terminal, so you can essentially install any tools that you might need from the command line. But if you're using the features part, basically it's going to install all additional tools that you need. It's going to check out those, let's say, settings in your configuration. So next time you start up the dev container, you'll have the things that you need. So for example, Azure CLI, if you're deploying to Azure, let's have this. So if I click OK, let's see what will happen. So a couple of things happened here. First of all, you'll see a little bit of a pop behind my lovely face that's saying, okay, I've just detected that you made some changes in your development container. So what you need to do is actually rebuild it. So it needs to create it, recreate it to take the changes, to apply the changes. The other thing we'll see, here is this lovely folder, .devnev container, and that's where you have all the, let's say, parts that were important for you. So it's stating like, what is your development environment? And if you look, there's just this interesting part. Let's see if this will work out, if I can increase this a little bit. Yeah. I hope you can see this a little bit better. It's saying, when you're building the container for your development, use Docker Compose. And if we go to a Docker Compose, what you'll notice, and if you are familiar with this one, you'll see we are defining two services. One service is called app, so this is where my development environment is, with all the Node.js interesting stuff. And then it's kind of a setting the network mode to service DB. There's a second container that's going to be created, and that's where your MongoDB is running. So what's the moral out of this? This means that using Docker Compose, you can, for example, provision a development machine in Codespace, maybe with 16 cores, and run multiple containers that you will need for your development. You are not constrained to one container or something like this, which is great. And then there's like the Docker file, which is basically kind of installing all the tools in your development environment, so you can kind of take care of all that stuff. Now, VS Code is pretty smart, and it's recommending me, oh, I saw a Docker file, do you want to install the Docker instantiation? So just to give you an idea, since these are containers, you can't install Docker, because it's kind of running already on a Docker host. There are a couple of tricks here and there that you can use to kind of reach from container to the host. Anyway, it's some of those things are not very official, but essentially you can do it for some operating systems. So let me just quickly do a commit. So I'll say like, I don't know, like MongoDB setup is ready. Let me make a commit. And yeah, I didn't kind of pushed everything. Now, here is something interesting. Let me close this one. As you can see, I have committed. Now, you might be thinking you made a commit, so most probably this is going directly to GitHub, right? But it's not. Because you're working in your own environment, in your container, this commit is going to your local Git. So if you want this to go to your GitHub repo, the public GitHub repo, you need to sync or push the changes. So if I do something like git status, it's going to, I'm the worst typer in the world, so. It's going to tell me that I have one uncommitted change, so I need to kind of make this push. Now, why I'm saying this? Because while I was experimenting with GitHub Codespaces, I wasn't really, I haven't realized this, and I'll do a lot of changes, I'll do the commits, and I'll just delete the code space, and I lost my code. So it's a little bit tricky, have this in mind. Cool. Most probably I'll have this already committed. Great. So if you remember, what we had was a development environment, but we included Mongo, and what happened is that we were advised to rebuild our environment. So Codespaces, and there's like rebuild container, full rebuild container. So let me go here and do a full rebuild. So what will happen is now I'm going to be disconnected from my container. It would be scraped, and using the wonderful Docker tools, I'm going to be provisioned with 2 new containers that I can work with. Now, let's give it a second. By the way, from time to time, when you're doing like crazy stuff, this might hang out, things like that, but in general, it's pretty straightforward. This look is very useful if you're creating a custom image. So if your Docker image kind of fails somewhere, or you can't kind of see where your working space is or something like this, basically you'll see it in this log, and there's a way that you can kind of go to this log as well. And I think that it's taking some time because we had like Ubuntu update and then kind of checking out all the Mongo stuff that we needed. Now, while we are waiting for this one, let me entertain you with another story from my product group days. So as a developer in a product group, very often what would happen is like what you write, you own. So basically you are on a call. If something happens during the middle of the night, some client had problems with the deployment, and you'll be answering the phone. And when this was happening to me, and if I had the option to stay, you know, at my home, not at the office, I'll have my laptop running, separate desk, all that stuff, connected, VPNs, all that stuff. Now with Codespaces, this might be actually easier because you know which is the specific commit from the CI/CD that went to your client. You just open your iPad or tablet, you run the Codespaces, you can check what's going on, you can fix the bug, you can create a commit, the CI/CD will spin up and will make a deployment for you. Then you'll go safely to bed to your partner and everybody will be happy because you didn't wake up the whole house. So that's where I think that Codespaces could be very, very useful. I'm sorry that it's taking so very long. Okay. So all my changes are here. Please, please, please start. Oh no. Like, okay. Okay, I think that this is my real dev container, the MongoDB one have started. Now, the interesting part is that you can run Codespaces from any branch. It's not just the main branch. And for every branch, you can have a different dev container. So any specific tools that you're using for that branch, it would be available in the dev container. The other thing is that you can have like a multiple dev container definitions. Every definition should be in its own separate folder. But for example, if you have a project where there's one environment for the UI guys, they have their own dev container and dev container definition, and for the backend guys, it would be another definition. So both teams can have their definitions there in the same environment. Hooray, my tools are here, which is great. Let me see if my Copilot is here. Due to some reason, it's not installed, so let me install it. I had to add this into the extension part. Luckily, this just takes a second. Okay, so I think that I have the extension. It's running. Surprise, surprise, I do have the MongoDB here. I can create a connection. There's something else that I need to kind of change, but I'm not going to do it right now, a little bit later in the code to connect to the MongoDB. So let's go to the Copilot, the star of the show. Let's put it like this. So we said, okay, we want to do a Node.js project. Now, the Copilot works in a way that you need to provide it a context so that it knows where it's operating, so it can recommend you stuff. I have a JS file, but let me do an npm init so that it will know, like, yeah, that's the one, that's good, great, amazing, yeah, absolutely, keywords, alter, I'm not putting my name under this one, so I have a package.json file. Why I'm doing this, I'm giving a little bit more context to Copilot. So let's give it a try. What we want to do is a Node.js, JS, and it's kind of starting to suggest a few things here. Web server, not with Express. Let's start with something simple. Okay. Now, the way to activate it is Control-Enter, and it's basically now generating some code for me. Now, what I'm kind of seeing is like, okay, obviously Express is a very popular framework, so all the suggestions that I see here are with Express, and yeah, I do have like MongoDB, my definition, so I also have some recommendation where it's a web server with MongoDB connection as well. All great stuff, but I can't see like a simple Node.js server. So let me give it a try, like no Express. Okay, let me try to see. Okay, things are starting to pop up, so that's a good one. And obviously the generated solution actually decided that this is also a valid code for me, which is not that great. I'll just keep it here. Obviously, that's been trained by the work that this guy has done. And this looks like a good server. Now, here's an interesting thing, right? It's not a fully completed code, so it's still kind of recommending me stuff to do. So let me close this one. And is this a valid code? Let me just quickly check this one. Are you going to recommend me something else? Run the server. Good. Okay, that's what I need to do. Okay, so it's making a suggestion what I need to do. So let's give it a go. Okay, server's running at ports. And that's the interesting part about Codespaces. You do have a port forward, so basically this is going to open the web application so I can interact with the web application or whatever application I'm doing. It might take a second. I don't know whether it's the public Wi-Fi that I'm using here or it's late in the afternoon and Codespace is a little bit tired, but I think it's the internet connection. And by the way, guys, the internet connection that I'm using is the public available one, so you don't need like something crazy fast to use those features. Cool. Cool. Okay, so that's how it started. So let me do something else. Obviously, let me kind of close this one here. Let me do another one. Obviously, Express is a very popular choice, so let me do maybe something a little bit more interesting, like REST API server with, oh, surprise, surprise, Express. Now, there's like two ways where the, I would say, Copilot is operating. It could suggest you a line by line what you are coding, so I can say, yeah, definitely include Express, that's what I want to do. Yeah, definitely create an app. Do I need the body parser? I don't know. There's an option for me to kind of scroll through a couple of things that could be allowed. Maybe there's no other suggestions here. Or at this point, I can say, okay, I gave you enough context, and that's how you can see like the different suggestions. I gave you enough context, I don't want this, let me know what else you can do for me. So here, that's the suggestion that the Copilot came with. Now, I don't want to use the MongoDB, but I still kind of want to use a REST API server. So I'm looking at this one and I'm like, maybe this one is a good one. And I can just take this and copy it, or directly include it. Boop, boop, boop. Come on, sorry, no mouse. Okay, so I like this one, and I can have it here. Cool. Right, so is this a working code? Maybe it is. Let's give it a try. Okay. Model not found. Okay, that kind of makes sense, right? We don't have Express. Cool. Now let me kind of, okay, now we should be fine and we should be able to kind of run this one. Now, opening browser. And by the way, let me click on this one, see which are the ports that are forward. So if you have like a couple of applications running, this list will increase, and there's like a setting that you need to put in the dev configuration file for this to run, right? Let me kind of run this again, and open in the browser. Okay, and I think that what we have, there was a REST API get, which is hello, that was there. Cool, it's working. So this is a working code, right? And just remember, guys, I kind of switch between different application frameworks, different languages. I don't necessarily remember all that stuff, and it would take me some time. I know it's a very simple code, but if it's for a language that you're not using every day, this might not be, you know, a great way to kind of go and search for stuff around. Awesome. So another thing, Express was lacking. We kind of added Express, but let me go back here, and there are like two things in the configuration file. First is forward ports. So if I want to use MongoDB local environment, I need to enable this one. So let me uncomment this one. Cool. And the other thing is like once you have something that kind of needs to do a post-install or post-build activities for your container, you need a hook to do it. And for GitHub, for Codespaces, this is the post create command. So once you have your container being built, there will be a set of scripts or a script or a couple of commands that will run. And for me, this is, obviously here is yarn, but it could be npm install, and this is going to install all the necessary modules that you want to use. If you're using something else, this could be a post-install routine that you have. It's not only this hook, there's a couple of other hooks that you can use. You can use a pre-install hook, you can do things during the installation, so you do have a full control over the install process. And the other interesting thing, because I'm looking at the remote user root, the first thing that I'll usually do, aside from checking the operating system, would be, can I get a root? Obviously, for this one, I can. So you have a full root access for this as well. So basically, you have everything that you need to do all the fun stuff. Cool. Right. Let's see a little bit more. So these are the REST APIs that were generated for me, but let's say REST API get products. Because, I don't know, products. I'm giving hard time to, okay, so that looks like a nice endpoint. Okay, okay. I'm missing something. I do want to do an error check, like check for error. Okay. No, I don't like this. Check for error. No, no. Let me do something like this. If error. No, no, no. It's not doing it. Is this something that might work? Okay. Let's do something else. As you can see, you need to kind of give a lot of details sometimes for this to kind of work out. So let me do something else here. Instead of send product, let me do something like this. I'm taking this out of the context and say return products in JSON format. Okay, it's kind of giving me a hard time, this one. While I was doing some tests before that, it would actually suggest and give me an entire JSON object that I could use. Let me see. So maybe that's something that I could leverage. Response. Cool. It came up with some pretty interesting ideas, so yeah, I can leverage something like this. Let's give it a go. Should be running. Great. Let me get the products. Cool. Yeah, I'm the worst typer. I told you guys. Cool. So it's actually returning this one. Nice. Okay. Now, in your development efforts, you can kind of push it. Sometimes it's like, I don't know, you can ask it to create some more complex stuff. During the discussions outside, somebody told me that there was an entire mathematical algorithm for transforming matrix. So, I don't know, matrix, transform, transpose, okay. It's linear algebra, right? Transpose, example. Let's see. Okay, it's kind of coming up with some interesting stuff. So if you forgot about this one, it kind of helps you out. Let me see something else. So I don't know. Let's give it a go. Shell sort. Yeah, it's a let's see if something will come up out of it. Maybe. Looks like it. So some of these things kind of come up. There was a very interesting article that somebody used a Copilot during a coding interview and basically crushed it. So for those algorithmic stuff, definitely it's very helpful. Now, we do have around 15 minutes, so let me just quickly try to do something else. And let me create a Mongo app. Okay. Sorry. As I said, worst typer in the world. And by the way, this is not only working with JavaScript, so for any language, it's going to detect it. It worked well for front-end pages as well. So from here, let's see, connect to MongoDB. Okay. Okay. I don't want this, right? Let me see what else you have in store for me. Is there something that I can use? Yeah, quite a few things kind of popping up here and there. So you can create an entire application out of kind of suggestions. So because we don't have a lot of time, it's kind of flying by. I've used this to kind of build a REST server API with MongoDB in the backend. I don't have a lot of experience in React, but it kind of helped me build a React application itself and kind of connect to my REST-based server. Couple of questions usually kind of pop up, and people are like, "Yeah, that's amazing," and you see like those scary articles like Copilot and AI are going to replace the humans in programming and all that stuff. And there's like questions like, is this going to replace us as developers? I think no, because based on my experience, Copilot is doing great stuff, but you need to pilot it to do the right stuff, pick up the code, edit it. Something else that I've seen, it's learning based on an existing code base. And one of the problems that I found was that a lot of suggestions for some of the things that I was doing were actually using deprecated APIs, and it couldn't recommend me, let's say, solutions with newer APIs. So that's something that kind of is another problem. So anything we do with the AI-supported programming, let me put it like this, would be relying on existing code. But when there are new features, new approaches coming up, most probably those things are not going to come as a suggestion that often. It's great for algorithms. They've been there for a while. So if you forgot a bubble sort or whatever sorting algorithm or some task or something like this, you'll easily find solution. If you need a hint on how to start your application or how to implement certain part, it will help you. If you forgot the syntax for, I don't know, running a loop for some language, you'll just say, hey, create a loop for this array, and it's going to give you suggestions and a code that you can use. And all of this is kind of a saving you time for going outside of the development environment, going to a documentation or searching the web for solution to your problem. So when people said like some of the people get up to 55% increase in productivity when they're coding with Copilot, I believe this could be true based on my experience. Is Copilot going to replace us developers? No, I don't see this kind of a coming. Cool. We have around 10 minutes, so if you guys have any questions, I'll try to answer. That's the first hand that I saw. Yep. Sorry?
Is this capacitor extension for WebStorm?
It's available. Copilot is available for, I think, since the latest release, it should be available for everyone for limited use, I think. So it's available. And Codespaces is also available. I think that you can get up to 60 hours of Codespaces per month.
Okay.
Yeah.
And the second one, as I understand, it's possible to reach the code with this tool from open repositories, yes? For private closed repositories, we can't get these hints.
No, for private repos, you can also get the hints. It's not problem. What I was saying is that Copilot itself is learning from a code, and this code needs to be accessible. So it would be looking at the open source projects and open source repos out there in GitHub in order to learn itself how to code. If you are in a private repo and you're creating your project, you install the extension and you can use the suggestions as well. There's no problem to that.
But where code is taken from? Is it taken from a closed repository?
I'm not sure. I think it's kind of I'm not sure about the mechanics behind it, but if you are concerned that your code would be checked out in a private repo, you can disable this one in the settings and basically say, I don't want any Copilot looking at my code. So this is available. But it's an open world, like share your code. Everybody's learning from it.
Hello. First, thanks for the talk. It's really great to see it on Codespace. I have one question. What are the reasons you saw why companies and developers wouldn't want to use GitHub Copilot? And I'm not talking about unexperienced developers, because this is known to be, not recommended for developers that are using Copilot thinking that it will boost their skills. But for experienced developers and companies that just have what are the things that are stopping them from using Copilot?
What would stop them? First of all, if you're working behind, I don't know, honestly, it's a very new product, so I don't have that much feedback from people that are using it. I would say, I don't know, let me put it like this. So I was asking myself, can I do the same things without Copilot? And the answer is to some extent. So code completion, there are some pretty good code completions out there. For example, if you're using Vim, I do use Vim from time to time. There are a couple of plugins that will look at your existing code base. It's going to index the code base, and it's going to provide you suggestions, which are pretty good, right? And all of this is local environment. Honestly, on top of my head, I can't come up with any idea why wouldn't you use Copilot, aside from maybe cost considerations. Otherwise, it's just purely optional and just help. Maybe, just maybe, if you are like working in a very niche area where, I don't know, the things that you are creating wouldn't have necessarily something to suggest, it might be useful for you. But I just like, this would be like very rare examples. Like those algorithms are out there. So there's another question.
Well, okay. So I don't have a question, but I have some answers to the previous question that was asked. So if that's okay, I can share more info about it.
Yeah.
So about why you don't want to use Copilot. So one of the reasons of not using Copilot is that, okay, it goes through all the GitHub and all open repositories, and it learns from that code. So it doesn't go to the private repositories because this will be like a privacy violation, first of all. The second thing is that why you don't want to use Copilot is that it may suggest you code that is open source, but it's licensed on like...
Code is generated. That's a very important thing. It's not taking a copy of the code, it's generating code.
Yeah, sure, but there are actually examples of that. It's showing the exact code that is written in some repo that is, for example, GNU licensed. Mm-hmm. And this was when it was in beta. This is one of the problems. So what the GitHub and the people that are developing the Copilot did is that they improved it by setting a tick that you cannot get suggestions from code that are licensed with like GPU,
licenses that
GNU or whatever. Yeah. So yeah, that's.
Oh, that's a good one. That's definitely a good one.
Yeah. Thank you.
Cool. Any other questions? Yep.
I just like to this question.
Sure.
Yeah. Since the colleague said about the issues that might come from using Copilot, it's actually that when you use it, you agree that it would also analyze your code, so it will learn based upon that.
Yep.
And if your code is not open source, you can leak it that way.
That's an interesting case. Could be. Yeah, in a way.
One more.
Sure.
Hi. My question is that when you have the extension and you're using it on VS Code, does it depend on the account you're using on VS Code, whether you're using GitHub, for example, in your project is on GitHub, or, for example, at the moment I'm working with Bitbucket?
Okay, so you do need to have a GitHub account in order to activate it, because I think that up until recent, the beta wasn't available to everybody. I'm not sure after Octoverse, I think that they opened it for everybody with some free trial. So you do need to have like a GitHub account, because this is going to kind of a checkout for the suggestions. It's not a server-based thing that will, so you need to have a GitHub account, but where are you committing your code? To a local GitHub repo or to, you know, whatever, let's say you're using other products, I think it shouldn't matter. Because you can run this in VS Code, you can run this in Vim as well. I think that there's also support for JetBrains, so it's not necessary that your code needs to go to GitHub, the way that I understand it.
Alex is here on Microsoft exposition and will answer your question with pleasure.
Yeah, of course, you can check me out. I'm just on the other side at the Microsoft booth for maybe another hour. There are still cups available, so if you haven't got one, just come by, check it.
Thanks to Alex.
Guys, thank you.